The city buzzed with life as people rushed in and out of its grand hotels, towering office buildings, and vibrant cafes. Amidst the hustle and bustle, a sleek downtown hotel stood like a beacon of elegance and order. Its polished glass doors reflected the busy streets, and its doorman, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, was a familiar figure to the hotel's guests and passers-by. His name was Marcus, a man of quiet dignity with a warm smile that greeted all who approached. Marcus had worked at the hotel for years, and his reputation for professionalism was unparalleled. That day started like any other. The morning sun bathed the streets in golden light as Marcus held the door open for guests, tipped his hat, and exchanged polite greetings. Little did he know the calm of his routine was about to be shattered in a way that no one could have anticipated. It began innocently enough. A sleek black car pulled up to the curb, its engine purring like a contented cat. Out stepped a man in a sharp suit, his posture exuding confidence, but his expression carrying a hint of impatience. He was middle-aged, with graying hair and an air of self-importance. Marcus gave his usual polite nod, ready to assist. But something was off. The man hesitated for a moment, glancing at Marcus with narrowed eyes as if sizing him up. Marcus remained composed, his expression neutral, though he sensed the tension. Without saying a word, the man walked past Marcus and toward the entrance, his gaze cold and dismissive. Moments later, he returned, this time visibly agitated. "Doorman," he barked, waving Marcus over. Marcus approached, his calm demeanor unshaken. "Yes, sir. How may I assist you?" Marcus asked politely. The man's tone dripped with disdain. "Where is the manager? I need someone competent to handle my issue, Nut." He paused, his eyes flicking over Marcus in a way that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. "Not you." Marcus's smile faltered slightly, but he kept his tone professional. "I'll be happy to fetch the manager for you, sir. May I ask what the issue is?" The man scoffed, his voice rising. "The issue is that this place is supposed to cater to people like me, not be run by people like you. Do you even understand who you're talking to?" A few passers-by glanced their way, sensing the growing tension. Marcus, ever professional, refused to be rattled. "I understand, sir. Please wait here and I'll get the manager." But the man wasn't done. As Marcus turned to leave, the man muttered something under his breath, something cruel and cutting, aimed at Marcus's very identity. It stopped him in his tracks. For the first time, Marcus' composure wavered. He turned back to the man, his jaw tightening, but he said nothing. He simply walked inside, his back straight, his pride intact. When Marcus returned with the manager, the man's demeanor changed. He was all smiles and charm, complaining about a minor inconvenience as if nothing had happened. The manager apologized profusely, promising to resolve the issue. Marcus stood silently, observing the charade, his thoughts racing. Hours later, when Marcus was back at his post, the man emerged from the hotel. His issue had been resolved, but he seemed to be in no better mood. As he approached Marcus, he sneered, his eyes filled with malice. And then, in an act of shocking disrespect, he spat, right in Marcus's face. The world seemed to freeze. Guests, staff, and pedestrians stopped in their tracks, their expressions a mix of horror and disbelief. Marcus stood there, motionless, his mind reeling. But instead of reacting with anger, he calmly reached for his pocket square, wiped his face, and looked the man square in the eyes. And then Marcus said something that made the man's smug expression falter, his confidence replaced by uncertainty. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten or retaliate. He simply said, "You have no idea who I am." The man froze, his sneer fading. For the first time, he seemed to notice the quiet authority in Marcus's voice, the unshakable strength behind his calm demeanor. Marcus straightened his jacket, his posture regal, as if he were the one in charge. And in that moment, everyone watching knew this wasn't over. What happened next would shock not only the man but everyone who had witnessed the exchange. Marcus was not just a doorman, and the man was about to learn that in the most unexpected way possible. The crowd around the hotel's entrance remained frozen, their eyes darting between Marcus and the man who had just committed such a brazen act. No one dared to intervene, unsure of what would happen next. Marcus, however, maintained his composure. He didn't flinch, didn't let anger take over. His calm demeanor only added to the mystery surrounding his cryptic words. "You have no idea who I am." The man's smugness faltered, replaced by confusion. He hadn't expected this reaction. He had expected outrage, a heated argument, perhaps even retaliation. Instead, he was met with a steady gaze that unnerved him more than he cared to admit. Marcus's silence spoke volumes, and was clear to everyone watching that this wasn't the end of the story. Marcus turned away without another word, walking back to his post as if nothing had happened. The onlookers slowly dispersed, whispering among themselves, speculating about the confrontation. Some murmured about Marcus' restraint, others about the man's audacity. But one thing was certain: everyone wanted to know more. Inside the hotel, Marcus excused himself briefly, heading to a private area where he could collect his thoughts. He stared at his reflection in a small mirror, wiping his face again, this time to remove the sting of humiliation. But his expression wasn't one of defeat. It was one of quiet determination. This wasn't the first time he had faced such disrespect, and sadly, he knew it wouldn't be the last. Marcus had always been a man of principle. He believed in treating people with respect, no matter their station in life. His role as a doorman wasn't just a job, it was a responsibility he took seriously. He was the first and last face guests saw at the hotel, a symbol of the establishment's hospitality. But beyond his role, Marcus carried a story that few knew, a story that gave him the strength to endure moments like this with grace. Born and raised in a modest neighborhood, Marcus had learned early on the value of hard work and integrity. His parents had instilled in him a sense of pride in who he was, teaching him that dignity could never be taken away, no matter how others tried. As a young man, he had dreams that extended far beyond the city streets he called home. But life had its twists and turns, and Marcus found himself taking a different path than he had imagined. What most people didn't know was that Marcus's life before the hotel was anything but ordinary. He had once walked the halls of power, sat at tables where decisions that shaped lives were made. But Marcus had chosen to step away from that world, preferring a simpler, more grounded life. It wasn't a decision made lightly, but one that had brought him peace. The man who had spat in his face, however, had unknowingly stepped into a story far bigger than himself. Marcus wasn't just a doorman, and the man was about to find out exactly who he had disrespected. As the day wore on, the tension lingered in the air. Guests whispered about the incident, staff exchanged knowing glances, and even the manager seemed unusually quiet. Everyone seemed to sense that something was brewing, though no one could say exactly what. The man, meanwhile, had returned to his suite, confident that the situation was behind him. He poured himself a drink, his arrogance intact, telling himself that the doorman's cryptic words were nothing more than an empty threat. He had dealt with people like Marcus before, people who, in his mind, didn't matter. But as he sipped his drink, he couldn't shake the unease that had crept into his thoughts. There was something about Marcus's demeanor, something about the way he carried himself, that didn't fit the role of a mere doorman. Later that evening, the man decided to attend a high-profile event being hosted at the hotel. It was the kind of gathering where the city's elite rubbed shoulders, where connections were made and egos were stroked. He arrived in the grand ballroom, his confidence restored as he mingled with other guests. He laughed, charmed, and boasted, the incident from earlier a distant memory. But then the room fell silent. All eyes turned toward the entrance, where Marcus stood, no longer wearing his doorman's uniform. Dressed in an impeccably tailored suit, he exuded an air of authority that seemed to command the room's attention. The man's face paled as he watched Marcus stride into the room, his presence undeniable. Whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire. Some recognized Marcus instantly, while others exchanged curious glances, wondering who he was. The man's unease grew with each passing second, his mind racing to piece together what was happening. Marcus didn't acknowledge the man at first. Instead, he greeted several guests, shaking hands and engaging in brief, polite conversations. The respect he commanded was evident in the way people responded to him, their tones reverent, their postures deferential. Finally, Marcus's gaze settled on the man, his expression unreadable. "I see you found your way to the event," Marcus said, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable weight. The man stammered, his bravado crumbling. I didn't realize you would be here." Marcus' lips curved into a small, enigmatic smile. Clearly, before the man could respond, a prominent figure in the crowd stepped forward, addressing Marcus with a warm smile. "Marcus, it's good to see you again. We were just discussing the upcoming project. Your insights would be invaluable." The man's confusion deepened as he watched the exchange. Who was Marcus? And why was he being treated like someone of importance? The room buzzed with quiet conversations, the tension thickening with every passing moment. As the evening unfolded, the man found himself unable to escape Marcus's presence. Everywhere he turned there were whispers about the enigmatic doorman who wasn't just a doorman. And the more he heard, the clearer it became that he had made a grave mistake. But the full truth of who Marcus was remained just out of reach, shrouded in mystery. The man's confidence had been replaced by a growing sense of dread. He couldn't help but replay the day's events in his mind, each interaction with Marcus taking on a new significance. He had underestimated him, treated him with disdain, and now he was beginning to understand that Marcus was far more than he appeared. But the question remained, who was Marcus really? And what would he do now that the tables had turned? The man would soon find out, and the answer would leave him, and everyone else, completely stunned. The ballroom hummed with quiet murmurs, the air thick with curiosity and speculation. Marcus remained a commanding presence, moving through the crowd with a quiet confidence that drew attention wherever he went. The man, whose earlier arrogance had evaporated, now stood awkwardly by the bar, nursing a drink and watching Marcus with growing unease. Every interaction, Marcus had seemed to hint at a deeper story, one that the man couldn't piece together but felt increasingly desperate to understand. Marcus, however, appeared unbothered by the man's presence. He engaged with the guests, his demeanor warm yet composed. He spoke with executives, dignitaries, and even the hotel's owner, each conversation laced with a familiarity that hinted at long-standing connections. The more the man observed, the more he realized how out of place he felt. He had entered this event certain of his own importance, but now, surrounded by people who clearly held Marcus in high regard, he was beginning to feel like an outsider. As the evening progressed, the man's anxiety only deepened. Questions swirled in his mind. Who was Marcus really? How did he command such respect from people who wouldn't give a second glance to someone in his supposed station? The man couldn't shake the memory of Marcus's calm words earlier that day. "You have no idea who I am." The weight of that statement now loomed over him like a shadow. Unable to resist, the man decided to ask around. He approached a well-dressed older gentleman who seemed to know Marcus well. Clearing his throat, he tried to appear casual. "Excuse me," he began, "that gentleman over there, Marcus, I believe. He seems well-connected." The older man raised an eyebrow, a knowing smile tugging at his lips. "Marcus? Oh, he's far more than just well-connected. You're new here, aren't you?" The man hesitated, unsure how to respond. "I suppose you could say that." The older gentleman nodded, glancing toward Marcus, who was now deep in conversation with the hotel owner. Marcus is one of those rare individuals who carries himself with both humility and authority. You'd never guess it by looking at him, but he's had a remarkable life. His experience, his wisdom, it's why so many people here respect him. The man's curiosity intensified. What kind of experience? He pressed, trying to keep his tone light. The older gentleman chuckled softly. "Oh, that's not my story to tell. If you're fortunate, perhaps Marcus will share it with you himself. But I will say this, he's a man who's earned every bit of respect he receives. You do well to remember that." The man's unease grew with each passing minute. He felt a knowing need to know more, but no one seemed willing to provide the answers he sought. Every attempt to pry into Marcus' past was met with cryptic responses or polite deflections. It was as if Marcus's true identity was a carefully guarded secret, known only to those who had earned the privilege of his trust. Meanwhile, Marcus continued to play his part with ease. He was fully aware of the man's growing discomfort and the whispers circulating throughout the ballroom. But Marcus wasn't the type to rush things. He knew that timing was everything, and he was content to let the tension build. He had nothing to prove, but he also knew that the man needed to learn a lesson, one that couldn't be taught through confrontation alone. As the event neared its climax, the hotel owner took the stage to deliver a brief speech. He thanked the guests for attending, praised the staff for their hard work, and spoke about the importance of community and collaboration. Then, to everyone's surprise, he invited Marcus to join him on stage. The man's heart sank as he watched Marcus walk to the front of the room, the crowd parting to make way for him. The whispers grew louder, the tension palpable. Marcus stood beside the hotel owner, his expression calm, but his eyes sharp, taking in the room with quiet authority. "Ladies and gentlemen," the hotel owner began, "it's my honor to introduce someone who has been an integral part of our success, not just as a colleague, but as a friend. Marcus has been with us for many years, and his contributions extend far beyond his role at this hotel. He's a mentor, a leader, and someone who embodies the values we hold dear." The applause was thunderous, but the man couldn't bring himself to clap. His mind raced, trying to reconcile this version of Marcus with the doorman he had dismissed so carelessly. He felt a sinking realization that he had severely underestimated the man standing on that stage. Marcus stepped forward, his voice steady as he addressed the crowd. "Thank you for your kind words," he began, his tone warm but measured. "It's always a privilege to be part of something greater than myself, to work alongside people who strive to make a difference." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "I've always believed that respect is not something you demand, it's something you earn. And it's not about titles or appearances, it's about how you treat others, regardless of who they are or where they come from." The man shifted uncomfortably, certain that Marcus's words were directed at him. He felt the weight of the crowd's attention, even though no one was looking directly at him. Marcus's message was clear, and it cut deeper than any direct confrontation could have. As Marcus continued to speak, the man's thoughts spiraled. He replayed the events of the day in his mind, each moment now tinged with regret. He had treated Marcus with disdain, assuming he was insignificant, only to discover that Marcus was someone far greater than he had imagined. But the full extent of Marcus's story remained a mystery, and the man couldn't shake the feeling that he was only scratching the surface. When Marcus finished speaking, the applause was even louder than before. He stepped down from the stage, returning to the crowd with the same quiet grace he had shown all evening. The man wanted to approach him, to apologize, to ask questions, but he couldn't bring himself to move. He felt paralyzed by his own shame, unsure of how to make amends. The night wore on, but the man couldn't escape the weight of his actions. The more he learned about Marcus, the more he realized how wrong he had been. But even as the event drew to a close, the true depth of Marcus's story and the consequences of the man's disrespect remained tantalizingly out of reach. The tension lingered unresolved, leaving everyone wondering what would happen next.